Pokemon ROM-hacks have been around for years, and one of their biggest feats is taking an official region and adding content that makes you feel like you're playing through it for the first time. But over the years, this practice has become kind of stale, mostly because they all follow the same formula of just adding all the Pokemon and making the battles harder. But lucky for you, I've stumbled across a new Emerald ROM hack that genuinely made me feel like I was playing through a vastly different version of the Hoenn region. But before we begin, if you'd like to support me as a creator, then I'd really appreciate it if you watch this video until the end, even if it's just in the background. With that out of the way, let's take a look at Pokemon Hyper Emerald, a completed Pokemon ROM hack that might just be the best way to play through Hoenn. Despite the number of Fire Red and Emerald enhancement hacks, one of the features I've seen very few of them add are changes to the actual region, and because of that, I feel absolutely no desire to pick up a ROM hack that doesn't, no matter what crazy features they add. But not only does Hyper Emerald add changes to the Hoenn region, but also slaps a nice new tile set on top of it. The overworld feels like a mixture of both the Generation 3 and Generation 4 art styles. Alongside the changes to the official and existing maps, comes some new ones as well. For example, there's a new forest behind Route 102 and a small beach behind Dewford Town. And it goes way beyond that as well, so you'll have a ton of new places to explore, and if you're playing in a Nuzlocke, a plethora of extra encounters. But even with the new maps aside, the entire region will feel refreshing to progress through, even if you've already played 100 other Emerald ROM hacks. A lot of people might argue that changes to the map aren't that big of a deal, and ROM hackers focusing solely on battles is completely fine. But I think a lot of people forget that traveling the world is almost half the gameplay. Good battles are cool and all, but walking into the same Rustboro city for the 100th time makes it really hard to keep playing. Speaking of cool battles, you might be wondering what the difficulty in this game is like. Well, first of all, you get two settings to choose from, normal and hard. I'll admit, I started with normal mode because I kinda wanted to give a perspective from the casual player, and it was kind of weird. The level curve was pretty bad, but not in the way you might think. All of my Pokemon got over-leveled really easily, and by the time I reached the third gym, I was already 10 levels ahead. Now you could combat this in many ways, whether it's fighting less trainers, using multiple teams, or temporarily disabling EXP in the settings, because that's an option for some reason. But after a while, I decided to just give hard mode a try, and it felt a lot more balanced with the level caps enabled. Although the battles were harder than casual, they felt on par with something like Radical Red, which I was pretty familiar with. Something strange that I noticed about the random NPC trainers though, was the strange jump between levels. On the same map, you'd fight against trainers with Pokemon on par with you, and others up to 10 levels below yours. Without the level caps on hard mode, it was difficult to guess where I was supposed to be on the level curve, and when it was time to challenge the next gym leader. One thing that did make the battles more interesting though, was the Pokemon variety. Hyper Emerald offers every Pokemon up to Legends Arceus, including the Hisuian forms. Despite such a large pool of Pokemon, it didn't feel overwhelming like Radical Red. If you don't know what I mean, one of my biggest gripes with Radical Red is the amount of encounters on every route, due to how small Kanto is. Every time I've tried to play through that game, it felt really hard to build a team with all the options I was given. But because of all the new areas, playing Hyper Emerald normally was pretty enjoyable, as I didn't have to cycle through 20 different encounters on the first route to get the Pokemon I was looking for. If you're a fan of starter Pokemon, then you're in luck, as most of them can be found on the early routes. I'm honestly not too interested in using more than one of them at a time, but if you are, then building a full team of them will be very easy. Of course, whenever I make a video about a Fangamer ROM hack, I have to discuss what quality of life options are offered. Obviously, you get the modern day ROM hack normalities, like the EXP All, infinite TM uses, and the physical special split. But something I noticed is that I never really ran out of resources. When I was playing on hard mode, I used a rotating team of about 15 Pokemon, and I never once had to use a rare candy cheat or grind wild Pokemon to get them up to par. And while there aren't a ton of free heals shoved in your face, I never had a problem with managing my in-game money,
and was able to afford as many Pokeballs, Repels, and Potions as I needed. Last but not least, I of course need to talk about the hack's story changes. The base plot of Emerald is actually still here. Most of the changes occur on the side and in the post-game. However, I had a lot of gripes with the new storyline and ended up not really enjoying it. It felt 2012, if that makes any sense. Just throwing tons of legendaries, evil team leaders, and other game protagonists in for shock value. Using official characters where they don't belong is something a lot of old ROM hacks used to do, and it's one of my biggest personal red flags in writing when it comes to these games. Of course, if it was just the characters from Hoenn, that wouldn't really bother me, but in 2024, throwing Cynthia in your story feels kind of lame. Obviously, this is just my opinion. I suggest playing it anyways and forming your own. While I wasn't able to get very far into the post-game, you do apparently get to visit a few other regions and participate in at least one other league. But this is where I kind of want to answer the question of why I decided to cover this game and if you should play it yourself. In the past, there have been many Fire Red ROM hacks that take Kanto and give it a new story, graphics, and or Pokemon variety. But for Emerald, I just haven't really seen it at all. Like, sure, you have innovative hacks like Elite Redux that let you use multiple abilities at once, and even add some new ones. But at the end of the day, when you're not in a Pokemon battle in that game, it just looks and almost feels like the same regular Pokemon Emerald you're used to. I don't dislike the idea of enhancement hacks, but if all you're going to do is make the battles harder and add more Pokemon, then why would anyone choose to play your hack over Radical Red, Inclement Emerald, or even Elite Redux? If I wanted a boss rush, I'd boot up Pokerogue, and if I wanted exploration tagged onto my difficult Pokemon battles, I'd go play Reborn or Rejuvenation. So even with Hyper Emerald's flaws, I'm still going to praise it for taking the effort to actually try to enhance the entire Hoenn experience, rather than just the trainer battles. Also, I should have mentioned this before, this is a Chinese ROM hack that was translated to English. Although I did find a few untranslated lines, they were only on a few NPCs, and the main game is at least translated. But hey, I hope you enjoyed this video, but more importantly, I hope you have a nice rest of your day.